Just ahead, there's another edition of the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I'm Executive Producer Michael Yaffee.
A pleasure to be here with you again this week, Michael. Today, the spy who was left behind. Russia, the United States, the true story of the betrayal and assassination of a CIA agent. It is by Texas trial lawyer and author Michael Pullara. And I thought in the wake of all this Khashoggi carrying on, here's an interesting story that kind of got buried by the United States government that happened 25 years ago, and it took 10 years for this lawyer to figure it out. Join us for the conversation. Florida Roundtable begins following these messages.
It was a great night partying and laughing with friends. That is, until you decided to drive impaired. Now there's thousands in fines, no license, and possibly jail time. And that's if everyone is lucky enough to survive. No fun at all. Celebrate responsibly. Use a ride service, call a friend, or have a designated driver. Always drive sober so that everyone can arrive alive. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles.
Floridians love boating with family and friends, exploring our state's amazing waterways. But even experienced boaters can lose sight of the risks of passengers standing or sitting in improper locations. Bow riding by passengers of any age is extremely dangerous. Be sure that passengers only sit or stand in designated areas while underway. Their safety is your responsibility. Safe boating is no accident. To learn more, visit the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission at myfwc.com.
If you're 85 or younger, would you like peace of mind and comfort for your family? We're Final Expense Direct with an urgent message for you. The average funeral today costs over $8,000, but the most you'll get from government benefits is $255. How will your family pay the difference? We can help. Our senior plans start as low as just $1 a day and pay up to $30,000 for a funeral and other final expenses. Peace of mind is easy. There's no medical exam. You'll have lifetime coverage, and your plan can't be canceled as long as you pay your premiums. Call now for free information about our senior plans. Answer a few simple questions and receive approval right on the phone. Plus, call right now and we'll give you a discount prescription card for free. Call 800-321-5396. That's 800-321-5396. Again, 800-321-5396.
This is the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith, Public Affairs Director of the Florida News Network.
And I am Executive Producer Michael Yaffee.
A pleasure to be with you this week, Michael. We're going to delve into some mystery and politics and international affairs this week. Michael Pullara is a Texas trial lawyer who was drawn into the story. Actually, a friend of his was a bureau chief for the CIA and was killed in the Republic of Georgia. And a sham trial put the wrong guy in jail. And he calls his book The Spy Who Was Left Behind. And as I looked at this thing, I found myself wondering, how many times has this happened?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to know the answer to that, though. I really don't.
If our government could be involved in this once, boy, I tell you what, it does. It kind of sends up a red flag. And this business that has been going on with Saudi Arabia here, and did they kill him? Did the prince know? It's kind of, there's a little bit of a parallel here because people in our government knew that our CIA bureau chief had been assassinated, and the trial was a sham, and they hid it from us.
Yeah, and we'll find out more about it as he talks about it as we bring him on. But it's an interesting story seeing what's behind the curtain. This guy has a lot of guts, though, to be able to do all this research. Yeah. I'd be a little scared.
I would too, and he spent 10 years of this, and he did it pro bono for the dead man's family to find out what really happened.
Yes.
So, and traveling back and forth from Texas to the Republic of Georgia is not cheap.
That's a really good point. I didn't think about that. I mean, lawyers can afford that, but that, to keep doing that, it's very expensive.
Yeah, and to take 10 years out of your career and
plus it gets cold over there in Georgia.
Yes, it does. This is a story, and I don't know whether I should say it or not, but a story that shines some light where the U.S. government and specifically the Clinton State Department maintained a great deal of darkness. He was Freddie Woodruff was an important guy in the CIA.
What's really interesting about the story, too, is it's a lot of what's happening is after the Cold War.
Yeah.
When you think of stories like this, you think of in the middle of the Cold War. And no, this was after. The CIA and, of course, Russian agents as well were up to some nefarious things even after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Georgia was looking to westernize, even becoming an associate NATO member.
Right.
And it seems only logical. Edward Shevardnadze, who had been a foreign affairs secretary and right-hand man to Mikhail Gorbachev, ends up, and he's a master politician, but he ends up leading Georgia, which was his place of birth, and seeking Westerners to train them in defense and in other words, our CIA, creating a secret service to protect their new leaders. And goes unsaid. Who are they protecting them from? Infiltration from Moscow, maybe?
Yeah, you started off this segment asking how many times has this happened? I'm starting to wonder what is happening now behind the scenes, We really don't know. We'll find out one day, I guess, when the history books are written.
If we all live long enough.
Yeah, right?
But it's, and it's not just this particular country. As I say,
of course.
This Khashoggi business got me thinking about this, too. So it's
stuff's going on in China, so
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. Well, we're going to be joined by Michael Pullara, and he's going to tell us how in the world he got involved in this in the first place. It's an interesting story, and we think it's one that you will enjoy. So we are going to invite you to stay put. We'll remind you that I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And the Florida Roundtable will begin our conversation following these messages.
An opioid overdose does not need to end in tragedy. At-home rescue treatments like naloxone can help you save a life. Naloxone is available without a prescription and doesn't need to be administered by a health professional. Learn to recognize the signs of an overdose, like unresponsiveness, snoring sounds, and shallow breathing during an emergency. To learn more, dial pound 250 on your cell phone, say the keyword Save a Life, and you will have the option to receive a one-time auto-dial text message from iHeartMedia. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Children and Families. Standard message and data rates apply.
Nothing's better than taking to Florida's waterways with family and friends. But some boat operators don't realize that bow riding is extremely dangerous. It can lead to tragic accidents if someone falls overboard because of speed or direction changes. Be sure your passengers sit only in manufacturer-designated areas while underway. Their safety is your responsibility. Safe boating is no accident. To learn more, visit the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission at myfwc.com.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you. 2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Wow, your flowers are gorgeous. What's your secret?
It's no secret. It's Bear Advanced.
You mean these blue bottles?
Uh-huh. I protect my beauties with all-in-one rose and flower care. It's insect and disease control plus fertilizer.
Really? What's this 12-month tree and shrub protect and feed?
Oh, I use it on my trees. It kills bugs for up to a year, plus it feeds. It's that easy. Hey, where are you going?
To get my own. I want a great yard, too.
Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. Always read and follow label instructions.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And Michael, as promised, we are joined by attorney-at-law Michael Pullara. He is the author of The Spy Who Was Left Behind, Russia, the United States, and the True Story of the Betrayal and Assassination of a CIA Agent. Wow. Well, Michael, first off, welcome to the Florida Roundtable. We're delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you, Reagan. I'm delighted to be here.
Let me, before we get started into the book, I don't, I consider your credentials are long and numerous, and as opposed to my sitting here and rattling them off, you are a Texas trial lawyer, but take the first minute and tell us a little bit about yourself, your law practice, your educational background, things like that.
Well, I wouldn't say that I have long and numerous credentials, Reagan. I'm a trial lawyer. What I practice is called complex commercial litigation, which generally means big cases with lots of documents, lots of witnesses, lots of money, and novel legal or factual issues. More or less, it's what we say, it's counter-cyclical to the market. If you look around and say, where did the money go? Someone will call a trial lawyer like me to try and find out.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, what in the this is a book, a story that goes back over 20 years. What drew you to how did you first come to learn about this, and what drew you to it that pushed you into a decision to be involved and write this book?
The book is the story of my involvement in a case that I handled. The case began over breakfast with the New York Times. I was reading the Times as I drank my coffee, turned the page, and read a story about an American Central Intelligence officer who was murdered near Tbilisi, Georgia, in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. And I recognized his name as being a man with whom I had grown up when I was a child. It was Freddie Woodruff. His father was my Bible school teacher. His mother was the host to many parties that I attended when I was in junior high and high school. His sister was in my graduating class of 28 souls. And I recognized that he'd been murdered in extraordinary circumstances, followed the story over the next few days and weeks, and as it unfolded that they had miraculously captured the young man who had allegedly killed him, that young man had confessed, that in a country where literally nothing was working, the judicial system had ground finally the product of justice, I just thought, it doesn't happen this way. And so I decided to use my skills as a lawyer to try and give the family a little bit of information, to give them a little closure. And so I sent off some Freedom of Information requests. I collected documents. I went through the new thing, the Internet, back in 1993 to 1995 and 1998, collecting information about the case. And when these materials started to come back, I discovered that our government had more or less proven that the young man who was in prison could not have committed the crime of which he was accused. I made a trip to Georgia to follow up on that information, and then I presented it to the family. And they're pious people. They're very good people, Reagan. And their response was, this is evil. What are we going to do to get that young man out of prison? And they engaged me to get the young man convicted of killing their loved one out of prison because they believed he was innocent. This book is the story of that adventure.
Is this something that you've seen more than once in your tenure as a trial lawyer, where you just look at the information and you saw someone in jail and you're like, that person should not be there?
I don't do criminal work, and so I don't typically see that sort of thing. But I have seen, for example, in one case that I handled, it was an Arab who was in in detention as an illegal alien because the country in which he was born did not recognize him as being a citizen. He was a deportable alien in the United States, but there was no one who would take him. And so he was languishing in prison and needed someone to help him get out to be able to live and work in America, simply because there was no place else to go. And so I stepped in to do that. In another case, I had a death row inmate who had become very religious and had taken a vow which prevented him from complying with some of the rules inside the prison. And the prison was forcing him to comply with those rules. I stepped in to take his case to help him in his free exercise of religion. It wasn't hurting anybody. It's just he had violated specific rules that the prison wanted to enforce. It happens, you see it, but I've never seen anything like this before.
I think one of the important things in setting the stage for this, and we don't want to give away too much of what actually happens because we want people to go out and pick up your book, but we need to set this stage and remind people that the beginnings of this story come in the downfall, the ending of the Soviet Union. Familiar names, Shevardnadze. But you're in Georgia, and this is it has its roots in the end of the Soviet Union, if you will.
Correct. I think that as Americans, we generally misunderstand what happened in the collapse of the Soviet Union. It's very timely that we are observing the death of George Bush because our 41st president was very careful not to spike the football as the Soviet Union collapsed and what was coming began to emerge. He recognized that this was not really something where the United States had defeated the Soviet Union, but more a circumstance in which the weight of history had basically destroyed an impossible project that had been set in motion 70 years before. When the Soviet Union began to collapse, one of the first things that happened was that the intelligence services and the defense services met together to try and figure out how they were going to fund their operations. And the funding of those operations was something that was essential because absent that, these wonderful machines that they had created together would fall apart. And so during the 4 months between Gorbachev's announcement of the collapse of the Soviet Union and the actual breakup, the KGB, the GRU, and the Ministry of Defense took over the drug trade in the Soviet Union. And they began dividing it up so that they would generate enough money to take care of their business. At the same time, the collapse of the Soviet Union threatened the continuation of the Central Intelligence Agency because the CIA had been created to deal with the Soviet Union and its implacable enemy was gone. So the CIA went in search of new missions. They had funding, but no mission. The Russians had missions, but no funding. And so together, they were searching in the dark for the future. And that future was occurring in Georgia, where Freddie Woodruff was the branch chief in charge of Transcaucasia, the three countries of Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. He'd been sent there to assist Eduard Shevardnadze, to give him a personal protection force and to give him an anti-terrorist army, a small battalion-sized special operations force. Those things didn't go unnoticed in Moscow because this was the first time the United States had undertaken such a project within the geography of the former Soviet Union.
So you said that the Soviet spies didn't have the funding, but they still had missions. What exactly was their mission after the fall of the Soviet Union?
Well, like any business, the first business of business is to stay in business. And their mission was to continue the operation of their organizations. More than that, their mission was to continue the Russian Empire. These are the people who are the true believers in the great civilizing mission of Russia and the Soviet Union. In our news today, you'll see references to the GRU, G-R-U, which is Russian military intelligence. I've met these people. They are, in fact, the true believers from the old Soviet Union. They are the people who believe that it is Russia's destiny to be the dominant player on the world stage. And they are willing to do anything to see that that happens. And so as the Soviet Union was breaking up, people were already setting plans in motion to reassemble the Soviet Union as the old Russian Empire striding into the 21st century.
And I think it's important for us to note that Edward Shevardnadze was, for those who weren't around or just don't remember, was a key player in the government of Mikhail Gorbachev. And as Georgia was moving away from this Soviet Union as it's crumbling apart, that was his homeland, and he becomes a very important key player. And it was very, very unique in that, and the story traces through the spy who was left behind. They come to the United States to learn how to protect people.
Sort of,
yeah.
Reagan. When Georgia first emerged as an independent country, it was led by a democratically elected figure, an academic, whose name was Zvad Gamsakhurdia. Zvad is Georgian for David. And Zvad Gamsakhurdia had been the nominee of the House of Representatives of the United States, had nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize at one point. He was a refusenik during the Soviet era. But when Georgia withdrew and elected him to be its first president, he...
And, Michael, I'm sorry, we're going to have to take a break there along the network line. Hold that thought. We'll come back and finish up that story. We are talking about The Spy Who Was Left Behind from Scribner Publishing by Michael Pullara. I am Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
You are listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks. And if you'll stay put, the conversation continues following these messages.
Have you written a book? You can become a published author with Dorrance Publishing, the nation's oldest publishing services company. Countless authors have trusted Dorrance for nearly 100 years to bring their book to the market. Our professional team will edit your text, design your book pages, and create an appealing, eye-catching custom cover. Plus, our authors benefit from a custom book promotion marketing campaign that makes your book available where people buy books, like Amazon and brick-and-mortar bookstores. So make this free call right now to claim your free author's guide to publishing. Don't wait another day. Take one step closer to realizing your dream of becoming a published author and seeing your name in print. You've already written a book, so the next thing to do is make this free call right now to Dorrance Publishing and get your free guide to publishing. Call right now.
800-485-6003. 800-485-6003. That's 800-485-6003.
Florida's boating environment is always changing. New sunsets, new experiences that you won't find anywhere else on Earth. But one thing that never changes: boating while impaired by drugs or alcohol. It's illegal in the state of Florida. Boating under the influence will land you in jail, or worse, kill someone you love. It's just simply not a risk worth taking. Learn more about Florida's boating laws at myfwc.com. Brought to you by the FWC Division of Law Enforcement.
Your yard's days of being picked on are over, thanks to the science of Bear Advanced Brush Killer Plus. Its penetrating formula is specifically designed to kill hard-to-control brush, like kudzu, poison ivy, poison oak, and wild berries, roots and all. And the concentrate product even kills stumps, so your yard never has to worry about being bullied. Bear Advanced. Get more from the blue bottle. BearAdvanced.com. Always read and follow label directions.
Terrorist acts and shootings are often described as great tragedies. They are not. We live in a world so concerned with being politically correct that they're afraid to call evil what it is, evil. Man's sin nature is as old as the Garden of Eden. Many love to blame culture, poverty, or lack of education and opportunity as the problem. They may have a good or bad impact, but the big problem is sin. Acknowledging our sin nature will show us our need for a Savior who changes us from within. That Savior's name is Jesus. He came to die for the sins of all who will acknowledge their sin. Faith in Him strikes a mighty blow at evil. So quit calling man's evil acts a tragedy. They are evil and God hates it. Yet thankfully He loves us in spite of our evil and sin. Jesus not only forgives us, but gives us the want to overcome evil with good. This is Brian Wright, speaking right from my heart.
All right, crew, let's get her dug.
Honey, want to give me a hand? I'm planting that tree, remember?
No matter how large or small your digging project may be, no matter how urban or rural, you must always call 811 before any digging project. 811 is our national one-call number, alerting your local utility companies to come out and mark any lines they have near your dig site. You must call 811 at least 2 to 3 business days before any digging project, so you can avoid hitting our essential buried utilities. This includes natural gas and petroleum pipelines, electric, communication cables, and water and sewer lines. So before you do this or this, make sure you do this. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811. Brought to you by Common Ground Alliance.
From Pensacola to Key West and all points in between, you're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is Michael Pullara. He is a Texas trial lawyer. He is the author of a brand new book from Scribner, The Spy Who Was Left Behind, Russia, the United States, and the True Story of the Betrayal and Assassination of a CIA Agent. Almost could be ripped from today's headlines, but it's a story that took place back beginning in the early 1990s. And Michael, you were talking about Edward Shevardnadze and this interplay and a role of the United States, and I wanted you to be able to go back and pick up that thought, finish that thought for us.
Certainly. When Zvodgam Sakurdia was elected president and revealed himself to have what were very colorable fascist tendencies, none of the Western governments would recognize him, nor would they recognize Georgia. And essentially, they gave their permission for a rebellion against him. That rebellion was led by his Minister of Defense and by the head of a mafia army in the country. And they unseated him, threw him out of the country, and then waited for their own recognition. The West let it be known that they would recognize Georgia if Georgia would bring back Edward Shevardnadze as a member of their governing council. And so they installed him as the most junior member. The very first thing he did was he called his friend James Baker in Houston, Texas, and said, I'll take this job if the Americans will provide my personal protection. Because Shevardnadze understood that whoever controlled his guards controlled his life. And the only people he trusted were his former enemies, the Americans. And so, with Clinton's explicit permission, the U.S. sent Delta Force operators to Georgia to train his guards to protect him from the other members of his own government. And in the process, they gave him a small army that he used to unseat those other people and to make Georgia into a Western-style democratic state.
I'm guessing this was all done in secret behind the scenes, that the American people really didn't know about this?
This was not something that the Americans knew about unless they were reading Russian newspapers. The Russians were complaining about it vociferously. They did not appreciate the fact that they did not have control over Edward Shevardnadze. But they had problems of their own at the time, and so didn't do much about it directly. The problems came really more unrelated to the big issues between America and Russia. The problems that ultimately led to Freddie Woodruff's death arose because Freddie discovered a mole inside the CIA, someone who was feeding information to the Russians and had been feeding that information for more than a decade. That person, realizing he'd been unmasked, turned to his Russian masters, and the Russian masters killed Freddie in order to try and protect that man from exposure. The problem was he'd already been exposed. The Americans knew who he was, had already opened a criminal case against him, and had made what I think of as a very dangerous decision to basically allow him to run free and watch him, to see who he went to and what he did, to see if he would expose others inside his plot. That's what got Freddie Woodruff killed.
And the ensuing trial, as it caught your eye and your attention, a justice system which really didn't make a whole lot of sense to anybody from the United States that was trying to follow this thing, and one that led you to raise some eyebrows and as you were getting involved.
Correct. In legal work, particularly the kind of legal work that I'm used to doing, the devil's always in the details. And as I went through the materials, there were several things that I realized simply didn't make any sense. For example, Freddie was shot while riding in the back seat of a car called a Neva. Think of a sort of a squished SUV, very uncomfortable, a bench back seat, 2 bucket seats in the front. It has a hatchback with a fixed window, 2 fixed windows on the sides of the back seat, and then roll-down windows in the front. Those 2 windows in the car that he was riding, the driver's side was closed, and on the passenger side on the front, it was down about 4 to 6 inches. Freddie was sitting in the back seat on the right and was hit in the head with a bullet fired from behind. The FBI inspected the vehicle within 18 hours of the murder. And a senior FBI agent out of Bonn, Germany, looked at the car carefully for about 10 hours and did not find a hole in either the metal or the glass. There was no way for the bullet to have gotten inside the car. But when we get to the trial, there is a hole in the car, and the size of that hole matches the size of the rounds fired from a gun that the defendant was allegedly holding at the time of the incident. Freddie's brain was never recovered. The Georgians took it. The bullet that killed Freddie was never recovered. Allegedly, it entered the car magically with no bullet hole, hit Freddie, scrambled his brain, and then flew out the front window without leaving a trace. None of that made any sense to me. In addition, the explanation for the shooting, that the car had failed to dim its lights, was driving with its bright lights, and that the drunken soldier was angry and fired a random shot at the back of the car. I did an analysis of the GPS location and the time of the shooting and discovered that at that moment the sun had not yet set. And so the explanation itself didn't make any sense. And as I went forward, when I went to Georgia, I interviewed the head of the Georgian Security Service, and he told me that the police had, in the presence of his people, planted evidence to connect the young man to the murder so that he would be found guilty. It was, from start to finish, a fraud that the American government allowed to occur because to do otherwise threatened the stability of Shevardnadze's government, Yeltsin's government, and their cover-up of the decisions made that led to Freddie's death.
When you were finding all this information out and trying to get more information on it, was there any pushback? Was it difficult to get some of this info?
Well, it was difficult in the sense that it required risk, it required commitment of time and money, and I was handling this on a pro bono basis, the American government went out of its way to try and stop my efforts. The book is the story of really two different investigations. Initially, I believed that it was too dangerous to try and solve the murder, that what I needed to do was prove that the young man in prison was innocent, and then if I proved he was innocent, everyone would say, oh, okay, that's fine, we'll let him out of jail, and if we decide later, we will reinvestigate the murder. But that didn't happen because the American government said, no, don't let him out of jail. And the Georgians, who were wholly dependent upon America for their sustenance, complied with that request. The problem came when Georgia needed American positive press, and I was able to get the press to come forward and write stories about this unfairness that they were perpetuating. At that moment, there was enough pressure for them to resist the American government and to begin the process of doing justice. But they would not go against America and let the young man out until I proved who committed the murder, why they committed it, and who covered it up. That caused me to have to turn my attention to Moscow, in which I was meeting with GRU agents, KGB agents, assassins, and smugglers.
And I would presume that at any point along the time, you obviously had to feel like you were skating on some pretty thin ice there.
Yes. Reagan, looking back on it, it seems foolhardy and dangerous. In the increments along the way, I thought that I had a reasonable degree of protection because I had made a decision on the front end that I would never mislead anyone. That if anybody asked me a question, I would tell them everything I knew about the subject. I would never talk in code. I would never hide anything from anybody. And as one CIA officer told me, that wasn't foolish. That was why I was alive.
All right. Tell you what, Michael, we have to pause here again along our network line. Let us remind folks that they are listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's talk and entertainment networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is Texas trial lawyer and author Michael Pullara. His new book, From Scribner, The Spy Who Was Left Behind, Russia, the United States, and the True Story of the Betrayal and Assassination of a CIA Agent. Available at all the fine bookstores and Amazon.com, and we'll continue our conversation in a moment.
Jake was in big trouble with the IRS. He owed how much?
$92,000.
Ouch. The IRS left no room for Jake to breathe.
They put a lien on my house, took all the money out of my bank account, took money out of my paychecks. So it was a nightmare.
He needed help fast.
I figured that all these companies were the same until I called Federal Tax Management. You could just tell they knew what they were talking about. Right then and there, I felt like I had some hope.
Stop the liens, levies, and garnishments fast and qualify for one of several special IRS programs that could reduce or even eliminate your tax debt. So, how'd it go for Jake?
They did what they said they would do. They came through for me. I ended up saving an unbelievable amount. I was so jazzed. I was extremely happy.
If you owe more than $10,000 in back taxes, take Jake's advice.
Give Federal Tax Management a phone call. If they help me, they can help anybody.
Call the Federal Tax Management Hotline now. 800-267-1344. 800-267-1344. 800-267-1344.
Are we there yet?
There's nothing better than a fun family road trip.
Come on, are we there yet?
Don't let a bad tire get between you and your destination. Before hitting the road this holiday season, make sure your tires are properly inflated, damage-free, and have adequate tread depth, including the spare tire. Inspect your tires regularly and keep your family happily rolling down the highway on safe tires. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles.
The wind in your hair, the sun on your face. There's nothing like experiencing Florida's waterways on a personal watercraft. Knowing how your PWC operates will keep you safe on the water. Remember, PWCs need thrust to change direction, so use a controlled amount of throttle to turn. Know your limits, never ride recklessly, and always wear your life jacket. Safe boating is no accident. To learn more, visit the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission at myfwc.com.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, the service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
Our very special guest this day is Texas trial lawyer Michael Pullara. He is also the author of a brand new book from Scribner, The Spy Who Was Left Behind, Russia, the United States, and the True Story of the Betrayal and Assassination of a CIA Agent. And Michael, I must say, I don't think I'd ever heard of this story until the book was presented to me and put in front of me. I'm not surprised that it happened, but these were rough times, and you have spent 10 years of your life pursuing this mysterious murder of this diplomat. That's a big commitment.
It is. I tend to be motivated primarily by curiosity. And the question that I asked myself at the front end of this adventure was, what can a moderately empowered, curious man do in the world today? Are we truly as isolated and weak as we think we are? Or can we, by tenacious attention to detail, literally change the world?
So when you were going, when you were going through all this, did it surprise you what goes on behind the scenes with like the CIA?
I actually was quite surprised by the CIA and by the counterintelligence officers in the special agents in the FBI. The quality and extraordinary professionalism of these men and women was beyond anything I could have imagined. We have such a corrupted view of them, born of the myth-making machine in Hollywood. We think of them one way, and they are, in fact, something else altogether. They are people of the highest intellectual and ethical caliber. They are shockingly attentive to detail, and they are completely committed to obeying the political masters in Washington. And so what I found was that the people inside the agency, the people inside the Bureau, knew the facts. Most of the facts. I was able to uncover facts that they had not been permitted to investigate. But they had been instructed by their political masters to do something else. And so they saluted and stepped off the mark. And that was exactly what they had done. And I was able, by following the breadcrumbs that they had left, to complete much of their investigation and to go forward. And was I surprised at the political side of it? Not so much surprised as confirmed in the pragmatism of it. I was surprised at the difference between what is presented to the public as reality and what is truly, in fact, the events that occurred.
In your overall opinion, after 10 years of this, what has happened in the Republic of Georgia? Has the judicial system improved, or where are they today as compared to when you began your investigation?
It's a very interesting question, Reagan. When the Soviet Union collapsed, everyone who had control over a limited resource used that control in order to make money and survive. So if I'm the postman and I have control over whether or not you get your letters or not, I will charge you for you to receive your letter, and then I will be able to feed my family. Corruption was rife down to the most basic level in Georgia. Immediately after the Rose Revolution, George Soros and his Open Society Foundation went into Georgia and began paying the salaries of all government employees. And they paid those salaries with the caveat that if you were caught in a corrupt act, you would be fired. But if you weren't, you would be paid a living wage. This all but eliminated corruption at the lower levels of the Georgian state. Corruption was consolidated at the very, very top. So that if you were president of Georgia, no matter how much money you had when you started, when you left, you were the richest man in the country. That problem persisted until Bidzina Ivanishvili, who is a multi-billionaire, one of the 200 richest people on the planet, brought together the various political parties and threw out the corrupt leadership that had taken over the government. He already had so much money he didn't need to be more corrupt, and so the government began steering itself towards a more modern state. This allowed them to let judges actually have power. Beforehand, when I was there, when you were in the courtroom, the judge would be very nice to you, very professional. She would go to the back, sit in her office, and wait for a telephone call from the president's office to tell her how to rule in that case. That sort of telephone justice is disappearing.
What, Michael, what is it, folks, we recommend this, The Spy Who Was Left Behind, to give it a good read, but what do you want people to take away from your book once they've read it?
I think it's a really good story. I think that if people enjoy mysteries, if they enjoy legal thrillers, if they enjoy espionage stories, if they enjoy modern political history, they're going to really like this story because it tells things in a way that allows you to see the world and how it really and truly operates. But the thing I hope people realize is they can do the same thing themselves. In an issue that they become passionate about, they can step forward and they can change the world. I'm not of this age, Reagan. I do not tweet and I do not like. I think of those as existential acts of despair. And I believe that it is because we think we are powerless. And the truth is, we have freedoms, wealth, technology, and opportunities that we simply don't take advantage of. And I believe that they can be encouraged to take advantage of them if they'll just read this book.
Very well said. And let us remind folks, the book is The Spy Who Was Left Behind: Russia, the United States, and the True Story of the Betrayal and Assassination of a CIA Agent. More than 10 years of mourning. It is from our friends at Scribner Publishers. It's by Texas trial lawyer and now author Michael Pullara. Yes, it is history, it's mystery, all of these things rolled into one. And Michael, thank you so much for spending so much time with us this day. We'd like to invite you to come back and do this again.
I am delighted. I look forward to talking to you two again soon.
I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And a closing thought in a moment.
Are you or a loved one turning or about to turn 65? Then now's the time to start thinking about your health care needs, specifically Medicare. If you're new to Medicare, there are a lot of options to choose from, and the whole process can be confusing. But the licensed insurance agents at Easy Medicare can help you find the right Medicare plan based on your budget and health care needs. Call Easy Medicare today and they'll guide you through the process. Whether you're completely new to it all or looking to improve on an existing Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplement plan, Easy Medicare can help you find a plan that best suits you and your health care needs. Visit easymedicare.com/radio. EasyMedicare.com is a non-government site. It is an affiliate of eTelequote Insurance, Inc., a private licensed representative of Medicare insurance organizations with a Medicare contract. Sales agents may be compensated based on your enrollment in a health plan. Receiving quotes through our website and from our licensed insurance agents is always free, and you're under no obligation to purchase any services.
800-957-6213. 800-957-6213. That's 800-957-6213.
For families facing the challenge of a loved one with an opioid use disorder, it's important to know that shallow breathing, snoring, or gurgling sounds and unresponsiveness can be signs of an overdose. In the event of an emergency, an at-home treatment like naloxone can help save a life. To learn more, dial pound 250 on your cell phone and say the key words "save a life." You will have the option to receive a one-time auto-dialed text message from iHeartMedia. Brought to you by the Florida Department of Children and Families. Standard message and data rates apply.
Hey, it's Tom McCubbin here, and I'd like to tell you about this new cool turf that is unlike any other, Scott's Pro Vista St. Augustine, and it's now available across the state from the good folks at Bethel Farms. Scott's Pro Vista St. Augustine will give you complete weed control and 50% less mowing when compared to traditional St. Augustine. Less maintenance and easy weed control? Sounds good to me. To get this new turf for your lawn, visit BethelFarms.com for more information. That's BethelFarms.com.
In a world of tiny tomatoes and backyard pests, one man and his better half dig deep to save backyard gardens.
Joni, stand by to upload expert videos.
Already loaded, Tom.
Wow, you're good.
You're not so bad yourself.
Tom and Joni McCubbin star in hisandhersgardening.com. Critics rave.
Tom and Joni, they really grow on you. 2 green thumbs up.
Don't miss hisandhersgardening.com.
Employ Florida offers resources and services to help you find employment.
Hi, Gary here. Employ Florida helped me improve my interview skills, plus write a great resume. I attended networking events with many employers and other industry professionals just like me. With the workshops and training found at employflorida.com, I was able to land a great job in my field.
Job resources, real results, hired. EmployFlorida.com. That's EmployFlorida.com.
We are back. You're listening to the Florida Roundtable, a service of Florida's Talk and Entertainment Networks. I'm Reagan Smith.
And I'm Michael Yaffee.
And Michael Pullara. It's an interesting mystery. A CIA branch chief assassinated in Georgia in 1993, and the wrong guy is in jail. They've whitewashed the whole thing, and Michael figured this all out and has put it into a book form. Interesting things. I enjoyed hearing about Shevardnadze.
Yeah, it must be interesting kind of seeing behind the curtain with the CIA and the former KGB and what happened after the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And so definitely read the book and you'll see some of it yourself.
And no big surprise here that the Clinton administration would pull a curtain around this and keep much of it from the United States.
Right.
Even while it was being printed in the Moscow newspapers. I also found interesting the fact that George Soros obviously poured an awful lot of money in there, and he doesn't do anything without some kind of expected return.
Right.
Well, anyways. Michael, you have a couple of other venues where folks can hear your thoughts.
Yep, just follow me on Twitter at BeyondReasonR.
Well, see, and Michael is a young fella here. You heard Michael Pullara say it. He doesn't Twitter, but that is the wave of today and tomorrow. That's for sure. And so we hope you will join him. I'm Reagan Smith,
and I'm Michael Yaffee.
Thank you for your time on the Florida Roundtable. We'll see you with another edition next week.
You've been listening to the Florida Roundtable, a news and public affairs presentation of the Florida News Network. The views and opinions expressed during this show are solely those of the participants and not necessarily those of this station's management, ownership, or sponsors. Please email your comments to reagansmith@fnnonline.net.